have the capability nor the intention to match China post.
Beijing has a more attractive economic prospect than India. The country boasts a nominal GDP of 18 trillion, nearly 6 times that of India. In the last decade, China's real GDP growth outpaced India by over 1.5 percent points annually. While these factors seem exciting, the tables are starting to turn. According to IMF data, China's population is steadily declining. This means that by 2027, the country will lose 8 million people. On the other hand, India will gain a whopping 75 million people, making it the world's most populous country. As if that's not enough, India's real GDP growth will be over 2 percentage points higher than China's. What's the real reason behind this shift? It's simple. China's population is shrinking, but India's population is becoming more youthful. Also, India has a far lower income per capita and a higher potential to grow than middle-income China. Welcome to Wyzeconomist. In today's video, we'll take a deeper dive into India's economy and explore the possibility of India overtaking China as a global superpower. Will India make this happen? Keep watching to find out. Latest UN figures show that India has already surpassed mainland China in population and will soon move past mainland and Hong Kong. China was like India not too long ago, struggling to reclaim its lost glory and etch its name in the sands of time. Good enough, India has met with China's leader, Xi Jinping, to share insights on maneuvering its increasing population growth. You see, both countries share several historical parallels. The last time they traded the same places in population was in the 18th century, when the Mongols ruled India and the Qing dynasty expanded its borders. Both countries had the richest empires that ever existed. However, as European powers went on a colonizing rampage, India and China went from rags to riches. Fast forward to the 1990s, both countries were on the same footing with similar economic output per capita. But then, China left India behind by creating more wealth than any other country in history. Although India regained its economy in the last 3 decades by liberalizing it, it remains behind in many ways. Today, China's economy is 6 times the size of India's. Even more shocking is that the average Chinese citizen has an economic output of nearly $13,000 annually, while the average Indian's is less than $2,500. Worse still, infant mortality rates are higher in India, and life expectancy is lower. The difference between both countries is primarily based on China's serious land reforms, consolidation of policy power, and opening up its economy to market forces. China made the first move and has been Asia's shining star ever since. The good news is that India is starting to open its quasi-socialist economy. Although competing interest among major key players constrain progress, growth is steady. The Make in India campaign, inaugurated in 2014, is making waves. In 2022, Apple announced it would assemble its flagship iPhone 14 in India, away from China. The tech giant has manufactured iPhones in India since 2017, but only older models. It introduced the latest model for the first time in India to highlight its desire to diversify production away from China. In the same vein, Boeing jumped on the trend. It struck a deal with Air India to supply India's largest airline 220 aircraft valued at a jaw-dropping $34 billion. This is the biggest purchase in the history of aviation. This deal is a test for the companies involved and for the South Asian economic giant doing all it can to woo foreign companies and gradually become a global manufacturing hub. Let's remember that multinational giants like Goldman Sachs have more global staff working from India than anywhere else. Studies show that 1/3 of the global workforce employed in the top IT companies are based in India, a sign that the country is gearing up to be the global IT headquarters. Also, wage costs are lower in India than in China, making the country more attractive to foreign investments. Unfortunately, restrictive labor laws, decaying infrastructure, protectionism, and other negative factors limit India's economic growth. But it's not all gloomy, because economists predict a bright future for India. They say India's economy will dethrone Japan, Germany, and the US to become the world's second largest economy by 2075. According to Goldman Sachs, India is on its way to becoming the world's second largest economy by 2075. It currently sits in the 5th position behind Germany, Japan, China, and the US. How does it plan to pull this economic heist? Advanced technology, innovation, a turbocharged workforce, and a higher capital investment will do the magic. India's technology industry revenue is expected to skyrocket to $245 billion by the end of 2023, with an incremental revenue addition of $19 billion. This growth cut across business processes, IT, management, and software production streams. In the next 2 decades, India's dependency ratio will be one of the lowest among regional economies. A country's dependency ratio is measured by the number of dependents against the total working age population. A lower dependency ratio shows that there are more working age adults capable of supporting older people. India undoubtedly has a solid and energetic workforce to keep its economy going. India has also prioritized infrastructure creation by constructing roads and railways. The country's budget now has a 50-year interest-free loan program for state governments to encourage them to join the infrastructure development bandwagon.
That experience breaks down, and that's a hugely important part of what Goldman Sachs is.
To scale up and generate more jobs to absorb the teeming labor force. This wouldn't be so easy, considering that labor force participation in India has declined in the last 15 years. Women's participation rate is also significantly lower than men's. In India, only about 20% of working-age women are employed compared to China's, where over 60% of working-age women are out there making a living. Still, India's first quarter GDP expanded by 6.1% year over year, zooming past Reuters' expectations of 5% growth. To put this into perspective, China's economy grew by 4.5% last year. So yes, India has some promising statistics to show off. While China's economy is nearly 6 times bigger than India's, it has some ground to cover. The stakes are high, but there's an opportunity to make things right. India has some collaborations with some of the world's strongest brands. Ironically, unlike China, it cannot own similar brands due to some financial constraints. Many of India's key exports, like clothes, are low-margin contract manufacturing that doesn't rake in the big bucks for the manufacturers since they don't own the brands. For instance, a fancy suit sells in London for $2,500, but the manufacturer in Jaipur only gets $250. That's like baking a giant cake and eating only the frosting. No wonder top Indian manufacturers prefer to sell in domestic markets rather than export. It is high time India focused on high-value jobs in pre-manufacturing services like engineering, design, research, and development. It can only think of overtaking China in the global economic race when it taps into these higher-margin domains. Regarding education, India's educational system primarily focuses on scoring high marks in exams rather than critical thinking, a prerequisite for innovation. Meanwhile, Chinese schools are churning out students with some of the highest critical thinking skills around the world. The country's automobile sector largely depends on duty protection. And infrastructure? The sector is marred by underbidding and difficulty in acquiring land for development. On the other hand, housing is a roller coaster of fraudulent builders who take customers for a ride with little or no legal consequences. The agricultural and food processing sectors remain largely untapped due to poor regulation and compliance. These sectors can take off like a rocket with the proper governmental support. Double-digit economic growth can become a reality with an ever-growing army of entrepreneurs. The government can make it easier for first-time entrepreneurs to start and float businesses. Increasing women's economic participation also helps the demand and supply side. From the supply perspective, it adds to the size of the workforce and promotes specialization and division of labor. And from the demand side, it supports the economy and generates additional demand for more goods and services. That way, it becomes a win-win for both the government and its citizens. India needs to step up its game to narrow the gap between itself and China. Unlike other European and East Asian countries, India is large and has a booming domestic market. Unfortunately, it is not leveraged on this optimally. With more economic pressure on its side, it won't be long before China hands over the baton of economic dominance to India. Will India pull through this? Please share your thoughts in the comment box down below. While you're at it, remember to hit that like and subscribe button to stay updated with the latest economic news around the globe. And we'll see you in the next one.